Let's do it.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're calling in from. My name is Nick Ezzo, and I'm joined by my colleague Mike Lynch, and we're here to talk about the state of automation in the finance office. We're going to unveil the results of our annual survey. This is part of Mike's Transformation Tuesday monthly webinar. So, first of all, let's introduce you to our housekeeper. His name is Botsworth, and I imagine him speaking in a robotic voice with a British accent. And he's going to help you understand how to get the most out of this webcast. First, you will receive a copy of this recording after the event. We'll try as best we can to get the recording out by the end of the day, worst case, tomorrow. Along with that recording will be a link to the slides that we're going to show you, as well as a link to download the report. There's no form to fill out. It is your free gift from us for participating in today's session. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen below. And then we'll have poll questions sprinkled throughout so that we can kind of get a sense for what your thoughts are about the data that we're showing you. So cool. On to the next slide. All right.
So what's transforming this month? We're going to talk about Auditoria's sixth annual State of AI Automation in the Finance Office report. This is something that we've put together for 6 years now, really looking at how the really hockey stick level of innovation in technology has affected the office of the CFO. And so we'll talk about some trends. We'll talk about some of the pain points that people are seeing and where people are spending most of their time. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the statistics that you'll see in the report, and we'll give you some commentary on what we're seeing across the organizations that we work with, as well as what some of the 250 different participants who were part of this report as we put it together, what they were saying as part of that process. And so, welcome to the golden age of finance transformation. And Nick, before we kind of hop into it, how do we land on that kind of golden age of finance transformation? It's kind of a unique story, and really, when you think about where we're at, we really are kind of in that space with AI.
Well, every year we try to come up with a theme. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes not so fun. Last year we had an Olympics theme, but this year we all kind of sat around and we thought, what's different this year? And what's different this year is that unlike the previous reports that we've put out, the previous five, people are really embracing AI, specifically AI in automation in finance. And so we are literally entering an age where you have CEOs and CFOs mandating to the organization to invest in AI tools to help them do their jobs better. So, as somebody who's been here for a little while, it's been a hard slog pushing the rock uphill. But I think we're finally getting somewhere, and we're kind of, to mix metaphors, we're turning a corner on finance transformation. So let me tell you a little bit about how we started this report back in 2020. When we launched the company back in 2020, we were thinking we wanted to take a pulse of the market and the buyer. Who finance professionals across the globe and find out where their pain points were, where the friction points were, what were the most manual tasks. And so we put that report together starting in 2020 to illustrate the state of automation within the office of the CFO and see how the priorities have shifted. As we put this report together, we've kept a corpus of questions the same so that we can look at trend lines from 2020 all the way till today. And we'll touch on some of that a little bit later so you can actually see the trending. The second thing is we try to mix up the report a little bit, and we try to ask a handful of different questions each time, so that the report doesn't get stale. So it's been a lot of fun, and we've had hundreds of people weigh in on this. And this is my kind of sincere plea to the folks on this call. We'll be sending you a link sometime next spring if you want to participate. It's about a 7 to 9 minute endeavor to answer, look like 20 questions, all opinion based. You don't have to do any homework. Normally, your first reaction is the best reaction. So we'd love if the folks who are on this webcast could participate in the 2027 report, 2026 report.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So, big picture, right? So, let's think about what we're talking about as we talk about on Transformation Tuesday webinars. It's really what's affecting finance, what's transforming, what's going on today. So, the big picture, as Nick kind of alluded to, and we've talked about on previous webinars, intelligent automation, that generative AI and digital agents are continuing to drive finance forward. And so, really, where we want to be in that space. As I mentioned, 250 other colleagues were answering the questions. We encourage, we look forward to counting you as part of those numbers next year. So really helping us understanding these tools that are kind of learning how we work in finance, understanding some of the reasoning behind the information that we're having to work through, and really supporting our judgments at scale, giving us those analytics, giving us that understanding of what's moving in my financial data so that I can make those strategic decisions. The Office of CFO is being asked to do way more in terms of strategy and operations than it has been ever before. And so it's really incumbent upon us to be able to give those financial those strategic kind of decisions or recommendations rather out to the other parts of our business, and we can't do that without the relevant types of data that's behind that. So it's a great opportunity to continue to drive forward in the office of the CFO. So that's what we saw this year, and we'll dig into it here in a moment. So Nick.
All right, let's jump into some of the numbers. So people don't have to look at a creepy robot picture anymore of a robot scribe. So here's a pie chart. All right, so we asked the question, what function in your finance office involves the most manual work? For the first year ever, accounts receivable has claimed the top spot. In fact, AP, accounts payable, was the number one answer, from the survey for the last 5 years. And this year, apparently, either AR has gotten a lot more complex or AP has been solved. But at about 1/5 of the vote, we've got accounts receivable coming in a narrow second, also with about 1/5 of the vote, financial reporting analysis. Um, Accounts payable dropped from the top spot to the third spot. FP&A, financial planning and analysis, at 14, internal audit at 11, procurement and vendor management, tax and treasury, and other sort of rounding out that last 10%. Mike, what are your thoughts on this? And why do you think that accounts receivable has bubbled up or accounts payable has kind of dropped down on that list?
Yeah, I think I would start with the accounts payable maybe moving down a little bit first. And I think maybe some of the things there is that, you look at the ERP ecosystems that are out there, and a lot of them are looking for opportunities to automate in the office of the CFO. Clearly at Auditoria, we're in the space where we try and help in both of those spaces, both in AR and AP, to automate through those processes. But I think that teams are starting to see opportunities to do that automation within their ERPs, finding opportunities to automate kind of, electronic ingestion of invoicing and things of that nature. So I think you're starting to see some greater adoption in that space. On the AR side of things, I think it continues to become a bit of a pain point. This is something where oftentimes, teams are having to chase down people who aren't paying their bills. AR problems can pop up when you see macroeconomic trends, when you talk about, companies that are trying to be really squirrely with making sure that they're holding of cash and making sure that they have their own cash, and they're kind of, dragging their feet to pay their bills, if you will, just to make sure that they have more cash. And so their treasury teams are saying, hey, what can we do to kind of hold on to money? And so I think in the accounts receivable space, this is where you start to see that there's some real opportunities here to think about automating dunning processes, thinking about how we're going through collections, thinking about those inquiries that come in, the customer that says, "Hey, can you just send me another copy of my bill?" Or, "Hey, I'll pay you on Tuesday for the cheeseburger that you sent me today." And so it's those types of things that I think are ripe now for automation in that AR space. So I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think you look at some of the macroeconomic trends. We also, if you think about what has happened in 2025, you're seeing, with, again, it's not necessarily to lay at a Doge level, but you saw a lot of companies that weren't even affected by what was being asked for at a government level, also looking to cut and looking to trim and looking to change the way they were doing their business. And I think that's going to ripple through the office of the CFO because they're so thinly staffed already. Once you start removing one or two people out of that, there's going to be some things that are going to fall through the cracks. And I think that's why you see that pain continue to kind of move into that space. I'm excited to see where our financial reporting and FP&A people get to ultimately as well. And I think there's some really cool opportunities to automate in their spaces as well, as we move forward.
Yeah. So let's jump to the next slide because, as you mentioned, that FP&A and financial reporting analysis A lot of that depends on gathering the data for the analysis. So how are you going to do the analysis without the data? So we asked our survey respondents overall, which of the following activities takes up most of your team's time? And as Mike just pointed out on the previous slide, FP&A and financial reporting, very high on that list. Therefore, again, a fifth of the respondents said gathering the data is the most difficult or time-consuming part. Communicating with internal and external stakeholders and reviewing communications and requests in the finance inbox. Those two together make up roughly 40% of the overall responses. What's common about those two? Email. The finance and accounting teams have been barraged. They are drowning in a sea of paperwork, or in this case, it's a sea of emails and attachments. So, like to hear Mike's take on that in a second, but just to round out the last few, analyzing data takes up a lot of time, executing audit and compliance related activities, learning from the company's business processes, and overall just other catch-all. So, Mike, any surprises on this slide?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about. I think everybody's pretty much aware that we're all drowning in email, and I think that doesn't necessarily change. But understanding too, if you can figure out a way to automate through kind of triaging those emails to get down, you think about if you have a team of 5 people on your controllership, that's 2 people who are spending full time just wading through email, and it's just an insane stat to think about. So, I mean, that's a place where you have to think about how you can automate through and where you can use agentic AI to kind of read emails at scale, or at least just delete some of these things. And I think sometimes it's laziness, but I really wanted to focus in on that top one, that gathering data for analysis. This is becoming the adult scavenger hunt for finance teams is where do I find the right data to be able to pull it together? Oftentimes they say, hey, we did this huge transformation effort. We moved into a modern ERP. Everything is great, but I can't find anything, or I can't run reports, or I don't know where to put it together. And I have no way of asking, and I can't go ask my technologists because my technologists don't understand the data that they're going to go search for. So it needs to be somebody in finance to do that. And they just can't, they don't have an opportunity to figure out where that data is and where it resides. And so I think it's really, as we see some emerging capabilities to really use natural language processing and other tools to be able to query your financial data to be able to pull that back. I think as those get more mature, that's going to be a really important piece for finance teams to be able to leverage. Again, as you're doing more, again, we talk about macroeconomic trends. While teams got smaller, there's been a ton of mergers and acquisition activity. And so that data scavenger hunt is only going to get worse because you're now trying to bring in disparate systems from other organizations to marry up with your data. And so something to be able to bridge that together, be able to pull that together, and whether that's a kind of a finance transformation effort to build a data lake and a data mart within your own organization, or whether you're going to buy and find tools to come in to help you do that, it's going to be incumbent. It's going to really need to drive that forward because that 21% of manual work that you're doing today to go spend time on it, that's when you go through and you're doing scenario analysis and modeling for board meetings or CFO presentations. You're doing that every single time. And so it's not a sustainable process. And so finding ways to get that faster is going to be really incumbent upon people.
Yeah, well said, Mike. I think it's time for our poll question, our very first poll question. Um, I'll ask our team here to go ahead and Mike, you want I guess I'll read the questions and you can go ahead and read the results.
Yeah,
How about
sure.
that? So my question for the team here, all the participants on this call, what is your top finance priority going into 2026? Is it process improvement? Is it automating manual work? Are you going to be fixing your shared inbox bottlenecks, replacing lost talent? Are you trying to improve your accuracy and your compliance, or are you going to be modernizing your systems? So we've got about half the participants. I'd like to get a little bit more than half. So let's
There we
give
go.
people another couple of seconds. Now we got 3/4 of the audience in there. I'll give you the 5-second countdown. Anybody who responds to this, I would greatly appreciate it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think we have enough data to
Yeah,
come up with some
I'm going to
answers.
share that out. Yeah, so clearly, for those of you who are here today, you said the automating manual work is going to be your biggest thing for next year, and that's, I think, finding where that is. I think making sure as you think about it, here we are sitting in November, we have Thanksgiving coming up. What manual work are we automating? Where are we moving through in that space? So making sure that that strategy is moving forward. You have that executive alignment, and you have kind of the project kind of set up. The strategic part of it is good. Process improvement is great. We often forget that we buy a bunch of new tools and software, but we forget to actually fix the broken process that we're using today. And so we kind of try and just drag that into our new ERP, and we realize it's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So we need to fix those as well. So that's some great opportunities there. Yeah, compliance and accuracy is important. You want to make sure your auditors are in good shape, and then modernizing your systems, which can be at a small scale and a large scale. So, some great opportunities to move that forward. And so let's take a look at what some of our participants said as part of our process. Um, so so Nick,
Yeah.
you want to share our
Let's
priorities
jump
of.
right on in there. So when we asked our audience what their top priorities are for the previous year, focusing on process improvement. So no surprise there. 36.7% are interested in that. Investing in new technologies to reduce the cost. About one-fifth has said that. So between those first two, we're looking at well over 50%, closer to 60% of all the respondents. Now, the last few of these, 13% said evaluating functional strategy, scope, and design. About 10% said hiring new talent due to the company growth. 7.6 replacing lost talent due to turnover, and 7.6 train team members for new skill sets. So pretty similar to the previous poll question.
Mhm.
Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as you see, process improvement, and if you've looked at any of our previous reports, that continues to be a way to move forward. And I think that's, we should always be striving to find inefficiencies in our processes. Over the past number of years, closing the books faster has been a continual piece, and most of that is going to be policy and process driven. Thankfully, we see now that you have a vast majority of companies that are closing the books in 4 days or less. And so it's at least the companies that respond to our survey. The ones that didn't respond to our survey are probably in a 13-day close. They don't have time to do surveys. But it's a great opportunity to think about, that process improvement piece is good, but continue to look for other opportunities. Where can we be better? But that lost talent, this is a big issue for us in the finance space writ large. And this is one where not only did we see organizations do a little bit of downsizing this year, but what we also have seen is a trend in colleges and universities and people coming out of it that many people aren't pursuing a traditional finance path. And so when we think about what we need in an organization, the office of the CFO, the talent looks different. And I think that's not a bad thing, because when we think about what finance looks like today versus what it looked like 10 to 15 years ago, or heck, even 2 or 3 years ago, the amount of automation, the amount of tool sets, the amount of analytics that we have available to us, it's okay to think about that our skill sets also need to start changing, and our people should start to look a little different than we did before. And so I think it's okay to think about how we're going to replace that lost talent. Now, the other thing I would say in that space is this is an opportunity that if you do have lost talent and you have those holes to fill, this is where thinking about, the people in the workforce today are the last generation who will hire an exclusively human workforce. Moving forward, we're going to have a hybrid workforce that's going to be human and digital. And so I think this is a great opportunity. Think about digital workers to come into your finance organization. They never take vacation. They never take time off. They don't get sick, and you just let them kind of continue to work. And so perhaps you may be able to repurpose those open headcount roles into other things within your organization and bring in digital coworkers kind of into that space. So, something to think about, and again, it's just that jumped up 75% growth. So you can see that that's becoming a significant pain point for people, and we'll watch it to see what happens to it next year, but that's going to be a great opportunity to think about where you're moving forward in that space.
Well said, Mike. All right, let's jump to our next question about document extraction. All right, so we did ask the question. This is the sixth year in a row we asked this specific question. Overall, what are the challenges across the finance office? About a fifth said time spent extracting data from documents like invoices and forms and so on. A few percentage points behind that, time spent checking and updating data. Following that, 14% time spent on manual repetitive tasks. Following that, about the same inaccurate, burdensome, or outdated processes. There's that word process again. We keep talking about process improvements. 12% said data accuracy and accessibility. So we're seeing a recurring theme there as well. 8% said portals that have to be accessed to make payments and or get paid. So vendor portals, customer portals, everyone loves them, right? Right. Okay, then rounding out the bottom three, evaluating new technologies or tools, adhering to compliance or regulatory requirements, or a few small percentage said other. And I'd love to know what those other things are. So Mike, I think we're seeing some continuity between the questions here, or among all of our
Yeah,
questions. What are your
and
thoughts?
extracting data from documents, it can't really be said more plainly than this. You are not as good as a human, are not as good at extracting data from documents as technology is. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean just go grab any old technology that's out there. And I do say in some cases old technology because there are a number of organizations who are still out there relying on some old RPA processes, some old kind of OCR technologies that, the volume of documents that you have today, all of those emails, we're all buried in those emails. And inside of every one of those emails is probably some sort of document I need to figure out. And so sometimes those old OCR tools are breaking. And so it's again thinking about how do I find some ways to automate through that process. And so that's a big one. And you can see those, that extracting information from document is going to, feeding that 21% we saw before of gathering up the data. Well, if I can extract it, catalog it, tag it, and put it in a place that I can go find it again, or my AI might be able to go find it again, that's going to be a great opportunity for me to extract information efficiently from documents and then use it in my analytics. And so those things would ultimately go hand in hand, which would really start to crush down the big parts of this pie wedge to help bring that through. And so again, the AI is way better than you are at extracting data from documents. You might be great, but AI is much better, much faster, and much more efficient, and isn't as susceptible to fraud and other things that are out there. So again, just to as you think about your processes and your strategy moving into 2026, that's a great opportunity to explore, and we'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, there's a few things trend wise that I wanted to point out on this slide that just came to me. One is that number one thing that you just talked about, extracting data, is the number one thing, and it has been the number one thing for several years in a row. What has changed, though, I want to draw your attention to that green pie wedge and around the 5 o'clock on this wheel. That's the time spent on manual and repetitive tasks. 4 years ago, that was number one. That was like 29%. It was actually 29.2%. So almost a third of respondents said that time spent on manual repetitive processes, that's driven down. So great job, everybody. Like I'm talking about the independent software vendors who are providing these tools and technology, as well as the early adopters, the folks who are on the front lines implementing and embracing these tools. Another one I think is worth pointing out, a little trend line, is that checking and updating data now sits at around 17.2%, which is 11 points lower than it was in 2021. So that would have been also way in the top. That would have been almost a third of checking and updating data. So again, it's great to see these trend lines moving like in the right direction. Mike?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have our next poll question now. So I'm going to drop that out there. So, question now is, how confident are you in your document extraction accuracy today? Now, again, keyword is accuracy. So, how much rework do you have to do? How are you moving forward in that space? So, and this is going to range kind of on a Likert scale from very confident down to not confident, or you may be not sure if you're not sure kind of where you are in that space. I would say we'll let you know who answers what, but if somebody answers not sure, I would encourage you to become knowledgeable as far as what you're doing with your document extraction today as soon as possible. So, All right, so we have about 60% of the people answering the question. We'll give just another moment before we kind of move forward in that space.
Yeah, I'm seeing the results come in, and we'll give people a few more seconds. But this is kind of intriguing. This is not what I have would have expected. But we'll give them a few more moments to answer. We're like Mike said, we're about 65% there now. So we'll give people just another few seconds or so. I'll give you the countdown. I would appreciate it if you gave us some data. And five, four, three, two, one, and let's look at the results. So. Uh, it's all over the map. I guess it's pretty.
Yeah.
A few are very confident, a few are mostly confident, and a slight plurality are somewhat confident. So the first one, very confident. That's good. All right, I'm really confident in my document extraction accuracy, but that's less than a third of the people who responded. Mostly confident. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then somewhat confident. I'm scratching my head right there. That to me says if I'm somewhat
We need
confident, that
help.
means I'm not confident, or I'm
Yeah.
pretty, I'm the other side of the 50-yard line on that one. What are your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I would say, if we were talking about, gathering some general information, or if I was trying to gather up some data to extract information to make some football picks for the weekend, I think I'd be okay with mostly okay with data or somewhat okay data. In finance space, though, I think that can be a killer. And I think that people got to, keep an eye on that because if you're extracting data and you're not confident in the data that you're extracting out of your documents and then you're using that for purposes, there's a deep ramifications downstream of what that could do. Perhaps I'm not accruing, I'm not forecasting, I'm not budgeting correctly. There's the I might, and if I don't have good data to rely on, that can be a big impact to my financial space. And so for the eight of you, for the I guess would be about of the people who answered, about 80%, 75%, 75 to 80%, who aren't really very confident in your data extraction, it's probably something you're going to want to get a handle on here before too long. So again, think about that as maybe a pilot you run, an opportunity to do some transformation inside your groups. And, whether it's you're looking at software or whether you're going to build something internally, that's probably an area that you want to be better in, or at least be more confident in where you're at in that space, so that you can move forward in that space.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder what that robot's thinking about.
Intelligence. So.
All right, we are in the home stretch, so let's jump to the very last question. We asked our audience, what technology trends will impact most this year? And generative AI was not something that was on our list 5 years ago, or 6 years ago almost. So Gen AI has been on for the last few years. It is now the top tech trend with more than a quarter of respondents saying Gen AI and natural language technologies. Um, Traditional AI and machine learning falls slightly to 22.6%, but it's still a strong second. So if you take the first two, that 25.9 and 22.6%, and add those together, about half the respondents said the technology trends of artificial intelligence and machine learning, both kind of traditional and Gen AI, are the most impactful. Autonomous agents and co-pilots debuted this year. That was never on the list before, but now it's in the top three at 16.5%. RPA has plummeted to 1.5, way down in that lower right-hand corner, that little sort of brownish mustard color, I guess Dijon mustard color. That was down from 10.2% just 3 years ago. So 65% of all responses fell under the AI-related technologies umbrella, showing really a decisive momentum in this space. Mike, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that's two-thirds of organizations who are using, AI, ML, agentic AI, the co-pilots and the proliferation of things like Microsoft Copilot, your Gemini, your Chat GPTs, and others that are within your organizations now. Being able to use those to create agents within your ecosystems is going to be great. And so I, really encourage that two-thirds of the organizations are moving forward in that space, which means their organizations, both finance and large organizations, are at least accepting of we need to do something in this space to continue to move forward and be more efficient as an organization. So I think that they're getting on, whether they're, doesn't matter where on the edge you are, whether you're on the bleeding edge, the leading edge, or the trailing edge, they're on the blade at this point, and that's really the most important part to be able to kind of drive forward in that space for that technology. That's really the ways where you're going to be able to scale, given all the changes with organizations.
Yeah, so I think that's well stated, Mike. I think we've got time for one more poll question. This is our last poll question, folks. So let's pop that up on the screen. Mike, you want to
Yeah.
read
So
this
the
one?
biggest blocker when you think about adopting AI, so you see that two-thirds of what our respondents had said that they're moving it, but what's the biggest blocker to adopting AI in your finance team? And so we talk about time and resources. So again, do you have the money? Do you have the areas there? The accuracy pieces. Does it work with my ERP? Or some of you may not be even on an ERP yet. You kind of figure out, does it work with my tech stack? Security or compliance concerns. So again, this is why we now have most organizations now are standing up AI governance committees. Do I have budget for it? Do my leaders understand what we're doing? Do they get it? They understand what this whole AI thing is? Which actually there's two sides to that. Some executives these days are thinking AI is a magic, a salve, magic bullet, silver bullet, if you will, to solve all of the world's problems. And that's probably putting too much on AI, but some of them aren't, don't believe it with it are. And then, kind of, you're just not sure where to start. So we have, good number of folks. We'll give you kind of another 5 seconds here to think about it as you move forward. So kind of give you kind of a five, four, and I understand we're only asking you for one. There may be a couple of issues here. So kind of three, two, one, and we'll go ahead and share this out. So,
All
and
right.
again, kind of across the board. So
Yeah, yeah. So no really strong, clear winner here. It seems like all of these things are blockers. A few people said lack of time. A few people said concerns over accuracy, integration with the ERP. I can't believe in this day and age, 2025, that we still have integration issues. What that means is that we probably have some legacy systems out there somewhere. Security and compliance concerns, also registered a couple. Executive alignment, that's always a big issue when you're trying to get people to change within an organization, and then just not sure where to start. And there are some questions that are coming in, by the way, in the Q&A, and thank you for those. But one of the questions we're going to get to in a minute is where do I start? Because that's a very important thing. So, Mike, any thoughts? I guess these were pretty much randomly or equally distributed around each of the questions. Budget was the only one that didn't pop up.
yeah, no, amazingly, we're able to shake the money tree nowadays. But my guess is, if you don't have executive alignment, you probably don't have any budget either. So I would guess some of these are kind of some cause and effect that would take place. But it's an interesting one too. I think the integration with ERP is probably going to be more that are folks who kind of some homegrown, maybe on-premises legacy systems that are out there. The lack of time or resources isn't surprising. When you start to see how much manual work some of these folks are doing, it would be easy to see, hey, you know what? I'm just not going to see any time savings to be able to recognize that value there. So yeah, so I think it's interesting. Again, the not sure where to start. And again, as Nick said, we kind of had that question coming in. So I would think from a not sure where to start standpoint, I think for kind of where we're at is thinking about kind of a readiness assessment. And we'll go to QA first. We'll come back to next month, but I think that's an opportunity to say, look, can we just kind of level set across our organization? Let's kind of take a look at it holistically. Let's have some brief conversations with people. And so one of the things I do for Auditoria is I do meet with folks to actually do that readiness assessment, to kind of say, where can we see the most value in leveraging AI tools moving forward? Where might we find opportunity? Is it in the controllership? Is it in the FP&A space? Are we looking at kind of, and then we can talk about some strategy pieces, like are we looking at a buy, build type of philosophy? Where do we want to move forward in that space? And so do encourage you to email us in, info@auditoria.ai, or you can reach out to either of us directly, and it's first name dot last name at auditoria.ai. And so that's a kind of a good one there. So I guess, we're here. So why don't we talk a little bit about some Q&A, and then maybe we'll go back to what we're going to talk about next month. So any other
Okay.
questions that are
Yeah,
kind of
there
coming in
was
so
something that
far?
did come in regarding the last poll. Somebody says, our biggest hurdle is getting legal to allow us to move forward with artificial intelligence, and that wasn't an option in the poll. So thoughts about legal teams and the best way to approach those friendly folks in the legal department to help them feel
Yeah.
comfortable with AI.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two ways to think about this. One is to think about it in terms of maybe a little bit of education that has to take place. And so understanding that we're not trying to hire Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, to come into our organization and start, I'll be back with all of your data type of thing. It's not, it's not quite that general artificial intelligence that I think people think about when they think about AI and kind of how that moves forward. I think the other thing you have at your disposal is a lot of opportunities to like this report, like other opportunities to say, look, these AI tools are actually way more accurate than our human beings are, and they are way more reliable, and they're not retiring. Most of you look across, we talk a little bit about the talent in finance. Again, look across the office of the CFO. You've probably worked with a number of those people for 25 years, which means most of you are probably getting closer to the point, you're closer to retirement than you are closer to starting. And so, what happens when all of that institutional knowledge leaves and walks out the door? And so helping your legal team understand, kind of educating them on what it does, what it doesn't do, right? There's guardrails around what this is, and then understanding the ecosystems in which those AI tools are created. There are organizations like Workday and some others that are certifying how AI is built, what we call AI certifications, and those are great opportunities to say, look, these people are building AI in a way that is transparent, it's auditable, and you can see it. And so that way, it helps your legal team understand kind of where you're at. They're kind of, their peers in that space and helping evaluate these tools is going to be kind of an AI governance style committee. And so this is a great opportunity to think about a charter, finding somebody who's conversant in AI tools and be able to kind of move those forward. That's an opportunity to kind of get those people hooked in with your legal team to kind of help move that forward. So, again, there's some opportunities to kind of, and it's common for us to, if we haven't transacted in that space, we may kind of fear the unknown a little bit. We don't know what we don't know. And so this kind of helps you get them comfortable with where you're moving forward with some AI tools in your space. I don't know, Nick, any other thoughts on your side
Yeah,
there?
no, I think that's well stated. Another question came in. This is a two-part question, Mike. Why don't I take the first part of the question? You can take the second part of the question.
Okay.
The question has to do with how have you seen the market change? And I'm paraphrasing this in the last 5 years, and then where do you see it going in the next 5 years? So I can
Hmm.
take the first part, having been around here in Auditoria since 2020, so literally 5 years ago. When we first kind of came on the scene and started talking to finance and accounting folks about artificial intelligence, machine learning in the office of the CFO, people looked at us like we were crazy, like we had two heads. It was like, what? What does that mean? And for a long time, I talked about the Sisyphus pushing the rock uphill. It felt like that for the first couple of years of Auditoria's journey. All that changed actually, and it changed pretty rapidly 3 years ago this month, in November of 22. And that was when ChatGPT burst on the scene. And the conversations we were having with people went from, oh, yeah, we keep hearing it's coming to, oh my gosh, it's here right now. And how is this going to affect my job? And so we've had a lot more interesting conversations with people. I've also noticed that the conversations we're having are actually a lot more intelligent and higher level. People don't have we don't see as much of the Terminator effect, nor do we see the magic lamp effect, as I call it, where AI is going to solve any problem. All you have to do is make a wish. Um, yeah, we've definitely seen a proliferation of tools within the enterprise, not just finance, but Claude from Anthropic, and you've got OpenAI with ChatGPT, and you've got Copilot from Microsoft, and a proliferation of other tools where pretty much every organization, every part of your organization is using some kind of a generative AI tool. So that's kind of where I've seen things go. Mike, you care to expand on what you see happening in the next
Yeah.
5 years?
So I think, one of the biggest areas that we're seeing a lot of investment in is the ERP tools that many of you have already decided to bring on board are heavily investing in AI within their ecosystems. And again, it's not putting a veneer of AI on it, but really trying to help make sure you have agents that are allowing you to work across all of that ERP to leverage in that space. And so, some great process improvements that are going to happen there. I think what you're going to also see, and this is an area that we're focusing a lot of our time and energy on, is building AI that continues to dive deeper in that financial reporting and that FP&A space. Really looking into all of the different data sources that you have within your organization, basically using a natural language query to say, hey, I wonder if, or what happens if this number goes to here? What happens to my finances, and where do we move forward in that space? Or what data do we have about these other things? Be able to just do that natural language query. So marrying up that natural language query with deep kind of AI into the analytics space is going to be a game changer for, we do here at Auditoria. Our bread and butter right now is in the Office of the Comptrollership. And, we're allowed both an AP and AR space, but that FP&A and financial reporting space, we have products that are coming in that space to be able to move that forward, and others are as well. And so I think that's going to be an area for OCFO that will accelerate into the future. I think when we talk about generative AI in general, when you talk about the usage of it, some great Harvard Business study and some other reviews that are there talking about the evolution of how we've used it, and being able to kind of query or talk to your GPT to generate code to move into your space. And Nick talked about Claude and OpenAI, ChatGPT. So there's some great opportunities to really accelerate your innovation within your organizations. And so I think that'll be good. And then we've talked about it in another webinar, but also the what's on the horizon is a type of AI called causal AI. And that's really helping do that root cause analysis. I think all the auditors are going to geek out over this type of stuff when we get there, but it's also great for business side folks because they're going to say, hey, why did this number drop by this percentage? And why did X happen? And why did Y happen? And AI is going to be able to actually tell you the root cause analysis of that. So really, when we talk about moving from data extractors and manual documentation to analysis and storytelling, that's going to be really compelling for us in the OCFO space to really just jam that forward. And that's going to be really awesome to kind of move out of that menial labor into meaningful work. And so that's going to be a great opportunity for us.
Yeah,
Any other
last
questions?
question. Yeah, last question. I think this is going to lead in your next slide. We're talking about how are finance teams reskilling or redeploying talent as automation scales? How do we get better about it? And I think this leads into your next Transformation Tuesday, Mike.
Yeah, so and that's the big thing is people are trying to figure out like what is this whole AI thing and where do we go and how does it apply to what we do in the OCFO? And that's we talked upskilling in general was one of these things that initially it was thought that all of a sudden you're going to have accountants who want to become citizen data scientists and all this other stuff. And it hasn't come to fruition. And that's what we thought maybe 3, 4 years ago. But as Nick mentioned, ChatGPT shows up there's a seismic shift in how that works. But what we're seeing is people need to understand how does AI work in the Office of the Finance. And so what we're going to do, and we're going to not necessarily do it every single month, but we're going to do kind of an AI for Finance 101. And what we're going to do next month and in December, and we'll record it. So if you're heading off for a 2 week vacation, don't worry, you won't miss it. Just make sure you sign up for it when we get that posted. But what we're going to do is really kind of help you understand where do we use AI in the Office of the CFO? Where do we and what does that even mean? Like, what is a language model? What is AI even? What's the difference between AI and machine learning? What is that? What is an agentic AI, right? And so some of us have been told go do AI, and it's on our goals. We need to figure out how that works, but we don't know where to start. And so our goal is to try and help demystify some of the noise around this. So you're not worried about what flavor of chips NVIDIA is selling to what country, right? That's stuff we just don't need to care about, guys. And so what we want to focus on is what do we need to know about AI in the Office of the CFO, and where do we need to be kind of better in that space? So, we talked about, agentic AI versus OCR versus RPA. What are those differences? And let's talk about that. So that's what we're going to talk about next month. Again, it's at a finance person level, right? We're not diving deep into the geeky stuff. We're going to kind of keep it where we're at in the Office of the CFO and really talk about how it affects us in financial roles, and we'll talk about some different roles across the finance department. So that's what we've got teed up for next month. Excited to kind of dive into that. We'll have some additional follow-on sessions that might dig a little bit deeper into a couple of areas in that space. But we really look forward to having you there. So tell your friends. We'll definitely have you there for our Transformation Tuesday next month for AI for Finance 101. So with that, I don't know, Nick, anything last words, parting words from
No,
you?
no, I think this has been a very productive conversation. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us today. I'm very pleased with the turnout and the participation. Can't wait to see you next month. And on behalf of Mike, myself, the whole Auditoria team, and all the smart bots backing us up, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.